Hey guys, my name is Agatha, and I grew up on a desert island. Can you imagine? But before I continue my story, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. And you should also give this video a like. I'm sure it'll make you feel something and also give you goosebumps. I don't remember my early childhood at all. And for many years, I didn't know anything about the human world. My last childhood memory is of a big winged buzzing thing that I was flying on. It was years later that I learned it was called an airplane. So in that memory, I turned 6 and I was very happy. A broad-shouldered man was sitting at the controls on the pilot's seat. When I strain my memory, a distinct silhouette of a man wearing headphones immediately comes up in my head. But the face, I can't remember it for the life of me. And yes, I called him Dad. I also remember my euphoria from the breathtaking view from the portal. By the way, this word I also learned many years later, when at the age of 17, for the first time in my life, I sat down at a school desk and began to catch up with the school curriculum together with the little kids. But I'll tell you more about it later. My last memory from this episode is my dad starting to shout something loudly and calling my name. Agatha! Agatha! If only I knew then that the next time I would hear the voice of this dear person would be many years later. Then I heard a terrible rattle, and then a loud boom, and a very bright flash, after which all the lights in my head turned off. I don't know how long I was out. My first thought after the plane crashed, even before I opened my eyes, was that I was lying on some sort of a soft, warm, and purring blanket. It was so nice and calm. And I thought it was some kind of good dream. I didn't want to lose that pleasant feeling of security and wake up, so I closed my eyes tighter. But when literally in a couple of seconds, I heard little kittens meowing, I opened my eyes in surprise and saw I was not lying under a soft blanket, but in the fluffy and silky black fur of a giant purring panther that curled up in a ball around me and her meowing children. Oh, you can imagine my shock and terrible fear at the moment. What would you feel in my place? The chilling horror made me go numb. I even felt that my heart stopped and I wasn't breathing, but to be honest, I could have simply died of fright, or even just suffocated, because I had no moral strength to take another breath. But the giant cat suddenly, kindly, licked my face with her rough, warm, and wet tongue. She started washing me and licking me into shape like her child. This feline mothering brought me back to life. The panther took me to be one of her kittens and adopted a human cub. And again, in her soft, fluffy paws, I felt under the most reliable protection. But in a moment, I fainted. The injuries and wounds I received during the plane crash affected me. Later, when I was an adult and started living in the world of people again, the doctors explained that I had a concussion. And because of it, something like amnesia. That's why I didn't remember my early childhood. Most likely, if my foster mom hadn't taken me in after the crash, I would have been torn to pieces by wild animals or simply frozen. The nights in the jungle are cold. Yes, you probably understand already. I found myself in a real jungle, and our plane crashed on a desert island. For a while, I drank the milk of this wild panther along with my so-to-stay siblings. Such natural and nourishing food made my wounds heal quickly, and I was completely fine. In a couple of weeks, I was able to get back to my feet and look for the crashed plane that happened to be nearby. Its nose was stuck between the tops of 2 giant sequoias, and fragments of its tail were lying around. I didn't find my father or his body. As much as it hurt me, life went on. I didn't know how much time had passed, maybe a few years. My furry brothers and sisters had grown up, and I became independent and able to make my own living. As they say, it's time for the nestlings to leave their parents' nest. Therefore, I arranged a cozy home for myself right on the tree in the plane cabin, and I left my foster mom, the Black Panther who'd saved my life. Moreover, she had kids again. But I often visited her and talked to her a lot. There was no one else. And the panther listened attentively, as if she understood everything. Perhaps you'll say that it's nonsense to talk to a dumb animal like this, but you have to understand, it was important for me to say the words aloud to anyone. Otherwise, they were losing all meaning. When I was silent for weeks, I was forgetting human speech. I had no problems with provisions. My main diet consisted of pineapples, bananas, and tropical fruit. Now try to guess my favorite treat. Guessed it? Dates and coconut milk. Yummy! And not far from my home, I found a drinking water source, so all my vital needs were covered. Since everything in my world was organic and natural without preservatives and food additives, I grew up very beautiful, athletic, and healthy, with long, thick, and shiny hair, although it was difficult for me to assess my appearance because there was no one to compare myself to. I bathed in waterfalls and the ocean, and during low tide, I collected beautiful seashells. I sewed my clothes from parachutes and life jackets. I found them in the plane, along with a needle and thread. So my life was eventually all set, as nice as it was possible. In general, I lived such a good life that most of the population in the human world could not afford. I would even call my life luxurious and rich. Think about it for yourself. Considering the fact that I had no problems with a mortgage, bills, or an evil boss, unpleasant neighbors, and things like that, we can say that my life was perfect. Don't adults in the big world of people dream that one day it'll all just go away? Exactly. Perhaps I would have lived my whole life in this primitive state, in the bosom of nature, if not for one event that turned my familiar world upside down and predetermined my fate. Once I decided to take a short trip around the island to explore the land, and I went to a picturesque, deserted beach. Oh, what a warm and pleasant white sand it had. But I didn't have time to enjoy it because right next to the water I saw a motionless human figure. I wanted to run away and pretend nothing had happened, but my conscience forced me to come back. After all, this was the first person I saw in many years, and if I left them like that, he would have drowned at full tide. I timidly approached and looked at my unexpected guest. It was a boy about my height, and next to him lay a small black rectangular object. I admired his beautiful, distinctive face, and when the guy suddenly opened his eyes, I shuddered in surprise. In a pleasant, low voice, he uttered only one phrase, "Are you an angel? Have I died and went to heaven?" And then he lost consciousness again. Oh, I can't even begin to describe how I dragged the boy to my home through the jungle and then got him to my treehouse using ropes from vines. He was so slender, but he was so heavy. By the way, I also took a strange black rectangle from the beach. I didn't know why, though. I then nursed the boy for several weeks, and at some point it even seemed to me like he would never wake up again. But fortunately, after a while, the guy did open his eyes. For some reason, he was very embarrassed and blushed all the time. When I returned to the big world, I learned that this usually happens when people fall in love. So the boy's name was Christian. He was the son of a Dutch seaman who sailed around the world and set a new world record. He took Christian on his voyage, but during a storm, their ship sank. My new friend didn't remember anything else. After his miraculous rescue, Christian stayed with me. 2 people were a little too much for the treehouse. So a little later, we expanded our living conditions. We added 2 more separate rooms made of bamboo. Christian turned out to be a master of all trades. He also told me a lot about the wonders of the big world, and I sat next to him and listened with my mouth open. My friend taught me new words such as skateboard, cigarette, or assignation. It took him ridiculously long to explain to me what money was and why people needed it. The same thing happened with the smartphone. Well, that black rectangular object that I prudently took from the beach, Christian could spend hours poking around in it and turning some screws. And he didn't part with it for a second. He even hung it around his neck on some kind of string. And to my question, why is he so attached to it, he answered that in his world, people sleep, eat, and even go to the toilet with their phones. Wow, how dumb! I still can't understand this. Agatha, as soon as I fix the smartphone, we can call or send a message to the mainland. People will determine our geolocation and save us, my friend often said. But I ignored those words. First, I didn't know what the word geolocation even meant. Secondly, I didn't understand what we were being saved from. Our life was great, and we had everything we needed: water, food, and the sky above our heads. Thirdly, no matter what Christian did, the thing he called a smartphone wouldn't come back to life. Its screen was dead black. Over time, I felt sparks between me and my friend. It's hard to find the right words, but in the big world, they call it chemistry. He didn't confess his feelings to me for a long time, but I immediately noticed that something was happening to him, and to me too. One evening after dinner by the ocean, he plucked up the courage and he kissed me. Oh, the memory of this wonderful moment still makes butterflies flutter in my stomach, and my heart began to beat faster. Agatha, I understand that there is not a single person for many miles from here, as if we're alone in the whole world. But for the first time in my life, I'm truly in love. And as a true gentleman, I want to officially ask you to become my girlfriend. This is so important to me. If my dad was around right now, I would definitely introduce you to him. So do you agree? he asked with a tremor in his voice, as if he was afraid that I would refuse him. But of course I agreed. After all, I was also in love with the only guy I saw in my life. After all, I didn't remember other boys from my childhood. After this confession, our bright tropical days flew by even faster. We were young, in love, and happy. Life seemed carefree and beautiful to us, though my boyfriend who grew up in the world of people was missing his past at times, but it was a fleeting feeling. But one day something happened. The memories of this make my hair on my head move and my heart drop. It was another wonderful day, and Christian and I dived looking for seashells and then sunbathed on the beach. He, as always, had his black rectangle in his hands. And at that moment, we saw 5 canoes approaching our island with dark-skinned people in waistcloths and necklaces made of human teeth. Their bodies were covered with menacing, colorful drawings. Later, Christian said that such patterns were usually worn by cannibal tribes. In the first moment, my boyfriend and I realized to be petrified and frozen. Precious seconds later, we realized that our interaction could cost us our lives. We looked at each other, joined hands, and ran as fast as we could. But it was too late. Christian stumbled, fell, injured his leg, and could not get up. By that time, the cannibals had already surrounded us and aimed their sharp spears at us. They shouted something frightening in their unknown language. Everything happened rapidly, but at the same time, it felt like these terrible moments lasted for eternity. For some reason, I grabbed the black rectangle from the ground, the phone that Christian dropped when he fell, and I pointed it at the cannibals. As I was aiming, they froze tensely, looking at the object in my hand, and I screamed at them in desperation, "Go to hell, monsters!" Then I threw the smartphone at their leader, hitting him right in the forehead. At that moment, the screen came to life and flickered with white light, and a song played loudly from the speakers. As Christian later explained, a song by Michael Jackson, who's called the king of pop music in the big world. This song was my boyfriend's ringtone. A direct hit on the forehead, and the melody heard for the first time frightened the cannibal's leader so much that he rushed back to the canoe, and everyone else followed him, and they really took off. I picked up the phone that kept ringing and handed it to Christian. He pressed the green button and said in a familiar but forgotten word, "Hello," and in response we heard a loud, agitated male voice. "So you're alive! I can't believe I got through to you! It's a miracle! I've already tracked your coordinates! I'm flying out for you right now!" shouted the voice from the phone. It was Christian's dad, who, as it turned out, also had survived the shipwreck. He had been picked up by a fishing boat, and all this time he never stopped looking for his son. When the voice on the phone was gone, tears streamed down my face. That day I watched the sunset on the island that became my home for the last time and prepared for a new life. My boyfriend hugged me tightly, and I realized that in the big world of people, I wouldn't be alone.